Hey everyone, and welcome to the Retro Channel. Today we are taking a look at this Sherwood double cassette deck. I picked this up from a local recycling center for about $5 a couple of months back, but it is in some pretty rough condition, so I do hopefully want to get this up and running. But before we get started on the repairs, let's just take a look at the deck itself. So it is a Sherwood double cassette deck, model number DD-3010C. There is a timer function, so I guess you can set it to record or play at a certain time. Both decks are auto reverse decks, so the actual heads themselves rotate and then the cassette plays the other way, so you get to listen to the other side of the tape without taking it out. Deck A is actually our record deck. Deck B is just a playback deck. We do have a dial for setting the record level and also the record balance, and everything is full logic, so these are just soft push buttons. Some of the standout features would be that it has Dolby B and C noise reduction along with Dolby HX Pro, which basically extends the headroom so higher frequencies get reproduced better during recording. And as you can see, there is some gunk over this side, and the actual microphone socket looks to have some corrosion in there. So it is in pretty rough shape. There's also a bit of rust on the bottom here. It looks like this area was exposed to the elements, so who knows what it's going to be like on the inside. Peering inside Deck A, I can see that it is fairly well used. It's quite dirty in there, and Deck B is also very similar. Nothing too special in the rear, just your regular line in and line outputs. There is also this DigiLink thing, which I guess is some kind of Sherwood proprietary thing for having the tape deck be controlled by another piece of the stereo equipment. This deck just came by itself, so I don't have any of that stuff. Apart from that, there's just an AC input, and our serial number, well, you can pause it and read that if you want. Part of the reason I picked up this particular deck, even though it is in fairly rough condition, is because it has the Dolby B and C noise reduction along with HX Pro, and of course it also plays chrome and metal cassette tapes. If it was lacking some of those features, I probably would have passed it by, because generally if it doesn't have Dolby or it doesn't have chrome biasing or metal biasing, then it's probably a cheaper deck, which means cheaper materials would have been used to make it, and it's probably not worth salvaging. But this one seems to have a good set of features, so I'm keen to get it up and running. There is a sticker on here from where I got it from. This is just a test and tag sticker, so it basically just means that the machine's not going to explode in a ball of flames when we first plug it in. Doesn't mean that it's actually going to work properly though. So before we do anything, I want to pull the cover off, have a look inside, see what's going on. So it looks like we've got 2 screws either side and 2 on the rear that will need to come out. Let me just take a quick moment to talk about our channel sponsor, PCBWay. These guys offer fantastic service whether you need a prototype PCB, CNC machining, 3D printing, or at the moment they're even offering up to 60% off flexible and rigid flex PCBs. I've been using these guys for years and their service has always been exceptional, so be sure to check out PCBWay for your PCB prototyping needs and a whole lot more. Alright, let's see what we got. There's a little bit of rust on that corner, but the top shell looks intact. Looking inside, everything looks very clean. Obviously, this is not a ventilated unit, so there's not really much space that dust can actually creep into this, but yeah, this is surprisingly clean given how it looked on the outside. You can see there is a little bit of rust residue from the front case on that corner there, but nothing too terrible. So thankfully it looks like only that microphone jack has actually been affected by some corrosion. We should be able to clean that up though. I'm not seeing any bulging capacitors in the power supply circuitry, so that's always a good sign. There is some of this glue that's just holding everything to the board. It hasn't turned a really dark color. Sometimes the glues that they use to hold these major components down turns really dark and actually becomes corrosive, but everything looks pretty good here. So I'm happy to power this on and just see what it does. Alright, well, I heard something buzz. So it looks like when I first apply power, this motor spins up and I can see that the belts have perished on it. So it's not actually doing anything. This deck, it looks like the top belt is intact, but there is another one going around the motor which I cannot see, so that might have perished as well. Let's just try and hit play, see what it does. Nothing. So doing a power cycle makes that motor spin, but that is literally all that's happening at the moment. There seems to be no other signs of life. So that is a little bit of a worry that absolutely nothing is going on. Maybe it's because this somehow detects that there's an issue with the entire machine and just shuts off everything, but I don't know. It seems a bit odd that we just get a small spin from this motor and then everything just stops. I think our best bet is just to start tearing this thing down. We're going to have to replace some belts anyway, so we may as well get this all out of here and start afresh. So I think these ribbon connectors should be easy to get out. They all have a little dot on the board that indicates which side the stripe on the wire is. So that shouldn't be an issue, and it appears they all have a different number of wires. So no chance of getting them mixed up, I don't think. The only thing I'll have to take care of is these couple of connectors because they're practically the same. Right, so I've almost got this main board out. You'll notice that there is one cable still connected, and I'll go through why that is in a second. It was all pretty straightforward, just removing screws and removing connectors. So this is the little board that sits on the side here. That just plugs in, so that's pretty easy to take out. And the rear case, yeah, it's just a bunch of screws that need to come out. So that's all good. Now this wire here and this one over here connect to these 2 points here. I managed to get this one out, but I pretty much destroyed the connector that it's in. I have no idea what these connectors are called. They didn't seem to respond to any of the names that I called them, but I've pretty much destroyed this one. So I'm probably going to have to solder this directly back into the board. And it doesn't appear that they unplug from this side either. So that's fine. I'll just solder that directly to the board, but I wasn't going to go ahead and destroy this one. Now, the reason they're so hard to pull out is because they have these sort of teeth here, and these wires actually go in the middle of that. And then in theory, the connector should come out. But as you can see, I basically destroyed this top piece here. And finally, I got the wires out, but there's no way they're going to go back in because those joints are just way too tight to get those wires to sit in properly. So what I'm going to do on this side, just so I can still remove the entire board without having this deck A follow me around, is just desolder this actual connector. But looking around the board itself, it's all kind of sectioned out. So this is obviously our power supply area, and it appears to be a linear power supply. There's a 7812, so a 12 volt voltage regulator there. Looks to be a 7805 there. And there's a 7808 and a 7908, so plus 8 volts, minus 8 volts. Being a linear power supply, these caps are all fairly low voltage, I imagine. They're 85 degree, 25 volts. That particular one's a 3300, they're probably 2200s. And they are a Samwa brand. Never heard of them. Looks like all these smaller caps are also all Samwa branded. Over here looks to be a microcontroller, so that's going to be controlling all the logic for the tape decks and allowing everything to talk back and forth to each other. There's a few adjustment pots here. This one says high speed, the one behind it says NOR, that one says NOR, and that one says high. So I'm guessing that's high and normal speed control for both decks. This section in the middle here says deck B part, so I'm guessing these pots that say VR502L and V something something R are going to be the playback gain perhaps, and this part behind it is HX Pro and oscillator part. So normal bias and metal bias, they probably double as the chrome biasing as well perhaps. Back here we have record EQ part, which kind of makes sense being the inputs are here. This is probably all just balancing out the line inputs that the deck has. It also has the connector here which goes off to this board, which is labeled Dolby board. So I'm guessing this IC here, which is a Hitachi chip, but it also has the Dolby logo. It's a HA12170NT. I'm guessing that's going to have both our Dolby B and C noise reduction components. This over here says deck A, so once again we've got a left trim pot and a right trim pot. Again, I'm guessing they're for playback levels. And over here we have mix part, which is pretty much all unpopulated. Not exactly sure what that would have been for, mix part. Apart from that, everything on the board looks pretty good. I'm not seeing any major issues, and on the underside, yeah, everything looks pretty good over here too. There's a bit of flux residue around the outside of the board, but nothing to write home about. There is a bit of a ring around this solder joint here though. So you can see where I've been scratching at it, but there is sort of a horizontal line that looks to be a crack. It doesn't look like it's cracked all the way yet, but no doubt that will happen in the future. From what I can see, everything else looks fine, so I'll just touch up the solder joints on this cap. I'll probably do the other large caps while I'm at it, and then we'll go ahead and pull apart the actual decks themselves. I'm probably not going to worry about removing this little power supply board, but it does look like it could have supported a voltage selector switch and could have had a secondary power outlet on it, but none of that is populated here, and the transformer itself doesn't have a second set of primary windings, so it's not going to support 2 voltages just with this transformer, which is actually loose. It has a loose screw over this side. As for the decks themselves, I can see 2 screws up the top here, and it looks like 1 or maybe 2 down the bottom there. So might be easier just to remove the whole front panel and then try and pull the decks off of that. Looks like there are a number of screws down here, so definitely need to remove the front panel from the actual case in order to get these decks out properly. And there's our 2 decks that we can now properly clean up because they are a little bit filthy in there. And we can also easily access these belts. Well, sort of. The belt that was going around the tape counter is stretched out of shape. Kind of interesting that only deck A gets the counter. Deck B does not have one. Well, certainly this belt still looks... oh no. Maybe not. I thought that was still intact, but it's just stuck to the other drums. At least it hasn't gone totally gooey yet. The other belt is mostly tied up around the motor here, and that has gone gooey. Trying to get it all out in one piece without it all breaking off inside there. Alright, deck 2 I believe is ready to go. I cleaned up all the old belt goop and replaced the belts with some new fresh ones. I don't know the exact size of the belts that are supposed to be in this thing. I did manage to find the service manual, but it is very scant on details and doesn't list the exact belt size, just a part number. So let's have a look at deck 1 together, because that way I can actually explain what's going on, rather than me fumbling around for about an hour trying to figure out how all these belts are supposed to go in here. So first of all, the plate on the bottom needs to come off, which are these 2 black screws here. It'll just fall away. And we need to take this little board off, so there is a screw hiding under this felt pad. And then there are 3 screws on this metal plate and 1 more screw back here. After that, this part should just lift off. You can tilt it towards the top there. And there is our gunky belts. One is completely wrapped around the motor, and there's another one down here between this wheel and this big flywheel. And I can see this flywheel here does appear to be turning this cog down here, so that's part of the actual mechanism that moves the heads up and down and obviously engages fast forward and rewind. So I'm thinking that perhaps because the belts weren't working, this was stuck in an unknown state and the machine was just shutting down all the functions. That's what I'm hoping for. So maybe once we get these belts replaced, everything will just magically start working. These 2 flywheels can be pulled out. You just lift them up. And that'll give you easy access to clean the actual belt grooves and find other bits of belt. I'll get to work taking off all this old belt goop. It's nothing special. It's just going to be some cotton tips and some IPA, so that's pretty boring. And we'll jump ahead to installing the new belts. Now, with all the old belt goop removed, there are 2 belts that we need to install. They are both square belts, and they both appear to be 1 millimeter. The first one that we need looks to be about 85 millimeters flat. So this one actually wraps around this larger flywheel around the bottom rung. And that then loops up around this little guy here. The other belt is approximately 100 millimeters flat. And this one wraps around the top of the flywheel, or the rear of the flywheel, and then passes the top edge of this flywheel along here and goes around the motor at this point up here. Now at first I assumed the belts went around both flywheels like that and then up to the motor, but that actually rubs against this metal plate here if you do that. So it definitely has to go around most of this one and the top corner of this one. So I think that's it. You can hopefully see the belt around the motor there. Just going to put a couple of screws back in so this doesn't all fall apart in my hands. Now let's see what happens when we actually turn this flywheel, because I think this is stuck halfway in between either play or stop or something else. That looks like it's in pause. This one's still slightly higher than this guy. Push that in again. Maybe that's pause. Now the heads are going back down, and hopefully that's now sitting in the stop position, and turning this large flywheel doesn't cause this cog to turn. So with any luck, when we connect all this back together, things will work as expected. It's only one way to find out. Alright, so I have the deck mostly reassembled. I haven't bothered cleaning up this wiring just yet. We're just going to give this a test, see if it actually works first. So let's apply power and see what happens. Alright, so once again that motor is spinning. At least it's actually turning the belts with it this time. But still nothing when we try and play. Okay. Let's just throw a tape in, see if that does something. Aha! It lives. And it looks like things are working as they should. I can see both reels are turning, so that's always a good sign. Don't want tape getting chewed up in there. And I can see some levels going on here. So it does appear to be playing that back. Let's try the other deck. In fact, let's try reverse play. That sounded right. Play. Well, that one doesn't sound healthy. Yeah, the reels are not turning in there. I think I see the problem. This belt here is just slipping, and that's on the take-up reel. So I'm guessing it's just stopping playback because the take-up reel is not turning, and therefore it doesn't want to have tape just spooling out into the machine. That's probably a good thing, but that is also quite annoying because, well, I thought I used the same belts in both decks, but... Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. It sorted itself out, and it was about to pull the tape out. Focus. So I'm not sure. I guess I'll just have to pull this deck out again and check that belt out. The problem is I need to get to two screws that are down the bottom there. They're sort of at the same height as this board. So I can either pull this board out or I can pull the front cover off, I guess. Right, I've swapped the belt over for a slightly smaller one, which isn't the easiest task. This machine does not have easy access to the belts. I'm going to leave the front cover just without the screws for now, and let's just try this again and see if it actually works first. Still got some kind of issue there. So I pulled apart the second deck one more time, and I think I've found the issue, and it relates to this plastic piece here. This guy actually sits in this rotating gear, and you can see there's some channels here, and there's a little white plastic post here, and a metal post here. There was previously a second white plastic post, but it looks like that broke off, and now it's just gone flying away. So I've gone ahead and drilled a little 1mm hole through this bit of plastic and pretty much inserted a nail from the top side and just cut and filed down the edge. Because if I try and glue on that little plastic piece, it's just going to snap off again trying to go around this little cam assembly. So I'm hoping this will hold up. It's pretty firmly in there. It's not going to come out on its own. And it looks to be low enough that it's going to clear anything above it. So I'm going to stick this back in and then reassemble the deck, and with any luck we'll have a working machine that will probably just need a tune-up. Alright, with everything reassembled, let's see if this deck works properly now. Alright, awesome, I can see the reels are turning and it does appear to be playing in the forward direction. Let's try the reverse. That also looks pretty good. Cool. Now, the big question, how does it sound? Okay, well, frequency response is good, but I can hear quite a bit of wah and flutter in there. The music sort of sounds a bit wobbly. Let's try deck 1. Ooh, okay, that sounds possibly even worse than deck 2. Let's take a look at the actual wah and flutter figures. I do have a test tape here so we can see what the actual figures look like. I imagine they're going to be pretty average. So for this, I'm using a program called WFGUI. It is free to download, so I'll put a link to that in the video description. This particular tape is from a guy in Germany who makes these tapes with some professional equipment. He does have a website. It doesn't really have a store as such, but I think he just does this more of a passion project, I guess. These are certainly a lot cheaper than trying to find an original test tape from like TIAC or BASF or something. They can run you into the hundreds of dollars these days. These are a fraction of that. So I think they're pretty accurate from what I've heard, and from what I've found, it seems to suggest that as well. So I'll put a link to these in the video description. So this tape has a 3150 Hertz tone, which we can use to test the wah and flutter. We just need to make sure that 3150 is selected on here. Hit start and then hit play on this deck and give it a moment to stabilize. Ooh, and we are reading pretty damn high. 0.6% RMS. That is pretty bad. Generally over 0.2% you can detect the wah and flutter, especially with like a constant note from like a piano or something. So yeah, that's pretty shocking. Let's check the other deck. Give it a second to stabilize. 0.36, 0.37, so that's better, but still not great. In fact, let's see if the service manual lists what they are supposed to be. Wah and flutter, no more than 0.13%, so we're up to 0.35 and 0.6%, so yeah, definitely an issue with that. I think I might pull these decks out again, try some different belts, because I don't know the exact sizing, because it's not listed in the service manual, and searching online I couldn't find any information about what the exact belts are for this machine or anyone selling them, so I'll swap around the belts, give everything another clean up and a bit of lubrication where needed, and I guess we'll see if that makes any improvement. It's not looking good at the moment though. Alright, so I went back in and cleaned everything up again. I pretty much use methylated spirits, or denatured alcohol as it's commonly known. That is generally what's recommended by most service manuals to clean like the pinch rollers and any other rubber parts. So I did that. I also swapped out different size belts, like literally a few millimeters difference in belt diameter. And I think I settled on what is the correct size for this machine. And that is 80 millimeters flat or 51 millimeters in diameter for the actual belt driving the reels, and 95 mil or 60 mil in diameter for the actual drive belt from the motor to the flywheels. But to be honest, it didn't really make much of a difference at all. Again, I don't know what the exact belts are for this machine. I think they're supposed to be 1.2 millimeters square, which is what I ended up using now, but it didn't really make a difference to the wah and flutter readings, unfortunately. So I don't really know what else to do here, but let's have a look. I'll show you how it sounds now. So this is deck 1, and yeah, we're still hovering around 0.6%. It is playing a little bit slow as well. That should say 3150 if the speed's correct for this 3150 hertz tape. So I could adjust the speed up a little bit. In fact, let's do that. So I know there was these pots down here. So there's a set down here that says high speed and normal, and a set over here with high speed and normal. So I'm guessing this one is going to be for this deck. So we'll just tweak the normal pot a little bit. That's slowing it down. Yeah, that's pretty close. In fact, very close. If I swap sides, it might be a little bit slow or fast though. No, still close enough. All right, well, the speed's good, but the line flutter is terrible. And looking at deck 2, the results are pretty similar, still around 0.37 to 0.4 even. So yeah, not a fantastic result from either deck. To give you an idea, this is what a 3150 hertz tone sounds like. And this is what a 3150 hertz tone sounds like when played back on deck 2 from this tape. And this is what it sounds like from deck 1. So yeah, not fantastic. So I'm not really sure what else to do here. I don't really want to go back in and change belts again, because getting these belts out of this machine isn't the easiest task. I could go in and maybe try and replace the pinch rollers, because they don't look fantastic. They're obviously a bit used, a bit worn. That might improve the line flutter. But with those kind of figures, there's not much point in me going into adjusting azimuth and checking if that's correct, and frequency response, all those kind of things, which is what I did plan to do in this video. But it's kind of pointless, because if you've got that high line flutter, that's going to translate through to everything that's played back on this deck, and also everything that's recorded on this deck. So even recording something and playing it back on a different deck is still going to sound like crap. So I don't really know what else to do with this deck. I guess let me know in the comments if you think I should go and replace the pinch rollers and revisit this thing. But I mean, it's a mid-range deck. It's not like a high-tier audiophile deck, so it's never going to be fantastic, but I think it certainly could be better than what it is now. So I'm not going to really bother about cleaning up the case, not in this video. It's kind of pointless if the decks sound like crap anyway. It's not the kind of machine that you'd really want to use. Probably just sit it on the shelf and stare at it if that's your thing. So as much as I'd like to say this repair was a roaring success and subscribe now and, you know, happy days, because apparently that makes for good YouTube content, I would probably chalk this up to a failure, to be honest. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. You can't fix everything. And if you do come across a Sherwood DD-3010C that's in need of repair, I'd probably just avoid it, to be honest. I guess that's it for this one. Huge thanks for everyone for watching and sticking with me on this. And a massive thanks to the people that support the channel on Patreon. If you want to do the same, links to that are in the video description. You'll get ad-free early access to all videos. And you'll also help me make more content like this. Sometimes it's a success story, sometimes it's just not, and that's the way it is. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.